So I'm going to try some of the pumpkin fries with some vegetable broth gravy made from this broth, which I would not recommend, and here's why. Look at that! Crazy, hey? So anyway, James is having asparagus carrot juice, and I'm going to be talking about these two books. I'm finishing up this one first. And I know I'm not having a fancy juice right now, but I already had a big mug of pumpkin latte, and it was good. But anyway, so yeah, just because you might be thinking, oh, I want to eat healthy, so I'm going to eat more vegetables, so I'm going to go for vegetable broth instead of, but not this one. I don't even know if it even tastes bad. It doesn't taste like vegetables because the number one ingredient is water and then sugar. It's bad. Anyway, can't give it to the dogs because it has onions in it. Although from the flavor, not much. So, anyway, I'm on page 109 now. 2015 International Journal of Molecular Science, Gang Zhou et al. 3 lines of defense by bacteria against antimicrobial agents. 1 biofilm. Combos of tobramycin and clarithromycin have shown clearance of P. aeruginosa, pulmonary biofilm, and D-amino acid can be used to inhibit biofilm. Active removal of antibiotics from within cells. The cell wall, cell membrane, and afflux pumps actively pump the antibiotics out of cells. Number 3, plasmid and chromosomal changes. Plasmids, small circular double-stranded DNA molecule in bacterial cells, can replicate independently and can survive in the presence of antimicrobial agents. Plasmids contain enzymes that can catalyze antibiotics into non-toxic forms. Resistance to penicillin is an example of the work done by plasmids. Bacteria can also resist therapy through chromosomal changes. Transposon, the jumping gene, can move to different locations in the same or different chromosome. 173. Borrelia organism is immunosuppressive since it can regulate B cells by altering their memory for recognizing foreign protein and increasing the inflammatory cytokine IL-6, as well as reducing IgG 1, 2, 3, 4. Page 175. The CDC reports more than 300,000 cases of Lyme disease each year. This doesn't include the hundreds of thousands of cases outside the U.S. or those not diagnosed, misdiagnosed inside the U.S. Page 179. The earliest known Borrelia infection inside a human is from studies carried out on the 5,300-year-old mummy Otzi from the Alps. B. garinii was identified in ticks from Austria in 1884, and British ticks collected between 1896 and 1994. B. burgdorferi was found in the UK during that time. The first report of probable Lyme was in 1977, and then 6 patients in East Anglia in 1978 had similar rashes, then called erythema migraines. 180. As of 2017, there were 51 species of Borrelia identified in Europe and the UK, 21 classified in the LB Lyme borreliosis group, and evidence that 9 are human pathogens. 61% in the UK were B. garinii, and 34% were B. balaisiana. 183. A study restricted to commercial test kits, including those used in the UK, demonstrated 60% sensitivity for samples proven to be from infected patients based on a definitive EM rash or prior positive serology. For early stage disease, sensitivity was only 34%. Lyme borreliosis antibody tests have zero sensitivity immediately after infection. When used as defined in UK guidelines with a screening test followed by confirmatory Western blot, the Lyme disease tests generate more than 500 times more false negative results than does HIV testing. In 2010-11, the HPA, Health Protective Agency, stated on their website that patients with late-stage disease are very seldom seronegative, and there is a greater than 99% chance they will have a positive antibody response. However, the references cited did not support twin-lane sensitivity. Page 193. Common misdiagnosis, 2014 EPPI study, 48% chronic fatigue, 34% viral infection post-viral syndrome, 32% anxiety stress, 31% depression psychiatric illness, 30% no diagnosis given, 21% fibromyalgia, 4% multiple sclerosis, 37% other. The others include arthritis, Bell's palsy, bipolar, contact allergy, Guillain-Barré, I don't know how you say that, and more. Misdiagnosis 3 times on average. Page 195. Since Borrelia infections occur at any age and frequently in the young and middle-aged, the cost of funding disability payments for 30, 40, or more years would be extraordinarily high. 199. When patients... I just wanted to comment on... I don't know that that's actually a reason why they're not diagnosing Lyme disease. I don't believe that's true, because, I mean, why would there be any more chance that people would be on disability with Lyme than they would be with any of these other things that are common misdiagnoses? So I don't see that as being why they're not going to be disability with Lyme. Page 199. When patients present with the classic EM, erythema migrans rash, even when the patient identifies the rash following a tick bite, clinicians often come up with an alternative diagnosis such as ringworm or cellulitis. 201.
So your mom thought it was...
I haven't told anybody about me, but thank you. I don't really want to. But yeah, my mom...
Well, don't mention anything.
Hey, hi guys. So, but the rashes, I mean, it can look, if you look online, you can find pictures, and I don't know how reliable they are, but the one I saw when I was 17 years old was about the circle inside that's solid was perfectly round, about that big, and then a little ring, like just maybe that far from the circle, a ring around that, and light pink. And then, anyway, but you can look that up.
Okay guys, get back.
Page 201. There's evidence that Lyme disease is moving northwards as temperatures rise due to climate change.
Get back.
222. Some French patients could have access to diagnosis with polymerase chain reaction PCR tests for Borrelia or co-infections performed in veterinary labs, but the authorities forbid this practice. German patients have access to more sensitive diagnostic tests and to prolonged anti-infection treatments. In Eastern European countries, physicians and labs are less controlled. 223. In February 2017, a long-term neurology patient with paralysis and confined to a wheelchair was cured after 3 months of anti-infection treatment. This is a quote. So, which I had prescribed. I didn't. Anyway, it's a quote from the book. Despite a negative Lyme serology result, before treatment she sent her blood to a veterinary lab and had to give the name of a dog, Mirza, to have her blood tested. The veterinary PCR test was positive for Borrelia. So I guess people are doing this to try to get diagnosed because they're just so frustrated. She was able to take up skiing again after a few months later, and she'd been in a wheelchair. Page 234. In 2010, Wolfgang Zoller, at the time patient commissioner to the German federal government stated Lyme borreliosis belongs to the most underestimated and underrated diseases in Germany. In Germany, about 1 million humans are affected. 235 ticks become active after only a few consecutive warmer days, more than 7 degrees Celsius. 236, besides the classical lab tests, we use dark field microscopy.
Get back inside, Elvis.
Magnification by 800 times, even up to 2,000 times, to investigate patients' freshly drawn blood. In some cases, spirochetes can be spotted and even be directly seen in motion. The first treatment step is to reduce the toxin load, which weakens the patient's immune system. Detox, hydrocolon therapy, and/or chelation therapy for flushing out heavy metals. Systemic hyperthermia, raising the core body temperature. Mitochondrial strengthening with biological infusions. High-dose vitamin C infusions, eliminating electromagnetic smog. Nutritional changes and supplements. Lifestyle changes and stress reduction. Guided meditation to activate resources in unconscious mind. Page 237. An upregulation of temperature is a boost to one's immune system. Molkoff 2009 shows that natural killer cells, which form part of our immune system, are increased and activated with raised temperatures by a generation of what are called HSP70 proteins that stimulate the generation of NK cells. A raised temperature further increases lymphatic drainage, decreases extracellular pressure, thus allowing easier access by leukocytes into regions of interest, positively influencing hypoxic areas and pH levels. Combining raised body temperature with biological infusions enhances their uptake and metabolism. Hyperthermia therefore enhances health in multiple ways. It helps in flushing out toxins, supports desired physiological function, and enhances the patient's own immune response. There are various ways to induce hyperthermia. Active forms include pyrogenes, such as infusions of mistletoe extracts. Passive forms include regional or whole body hyperthermia. In the first case, heat is generated by an electromagnetic field. In the latter case, the water filtered infrared lamps over a special bed. The second option is time-consuming and may take over 4 hours. Immediately preceding a session, we enrich oxygenation, mostly with high-dose vitamin C infusions, 25 to 40 grams. We aim at peak body temps of 38.5 degrees Celsius to maximum 39.5 degrees Celsius. And there's a typo on page 238. I don't think it's supposed to be 400 degrees Celsius. Page 238. Higher temps do not harm Borrelia spirochetes. Birds have body core temps of 40 to 42 degrees Celsius. The rationale of hyperthermia lies not in directly damaging the spirochetes, but in enhancing the potency of conjoint therapies and in boosting the innate and adaptive immune systems of the patient. Hyperthermia treatments are given in about 3 to 5 fractions with a pause of 3 to 4 days in between. A daily fraction is not recommended because cells bind up protective heat shock proteins and it takes 48 hours to denature them again. These heat shock proteins, HSP70 and HSP90, partly migrate beyond the cell membrane, play an important part in stimulating the immune system. The above was supplied by Zanita Mishu in Germany. The below is by Dr. Armin Schwarzbach. Lyme disease affecting between 650,000 and 850,000 Europeans every year. Fewer than 50% recall a tick bite or bullseye rash. Without those, Lyme ends up being misdiagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome, fibro, rheumatoid arthritis, carpal tunnel syndrome, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, motor neuron disease, depression, autism, and more. The ELISA test, which is done at your doctor's office, misses 35 to 60% of the culture-proven Lyme borreliosis cases. Western blot IDs approximately 60% of chronically infected. (243) Tickplex contains a new antigen for round bodies. Persister forms of Borrelia. Tickplex also allows for the simultaneous determination of multiple pathogens in the complexity of tick-borne infections, with a high sensitivity of approximately 95% and a specificity of 98%. TICPLEX detects IgM and IgG antibodies of various bacterial and viral pathogens at the same time. It is the first ELISA system for all the main co-infections, Ehrlichia, Anaplasma, Babesia, Rickettsia, and Bartonella. It's not possible to test the treatment success based on Borrelia antibodies because the titer of antibodies can persist in the blood for years. Recent Borrelia burgdorferi infections, bullseye rash, or summer flu can develop antibodies after weeks, and around 40% don't show them at all. The Borrelia ELISpot can eliminate some problems. The test reflects the current activity of chronic and recent Borrelia burgdorferi infections. It's highly sensitive and can detect even one single Borrelia burgdorferi reactive T cell in the sample. This test is one of the most sensitive cellular assays available. It's between 20 to 200 times more sensitive than a conventional ELISA. It displays a similar sensitivity to a RT-PCR analysis, but detects the secreted protein instead of the mRNA. Results should usually be negative about 4 to 8 weeks after completion of an effective therapy. Sensitivity of ELISpot is estimated at 84%, and the specificity is 94%. Bernard Raxlin, MD from New York City, found 95% of his patients to be positive by TICPLEX and 85% positive by ELISpot. 245, 40% of Lyme patients end up with long-term health problems. 248, patients with chronic tick-borne disease have continual IgM response without much IgG response. This is page 248. The immune system is dysregulated, so CD40 expression is required for antibody class switching. 2. The presence of relapsing fever, Borrelia, and co-infection prevents IgG production. Furthermore, patients with tick-borne diseases usually make more IgG2 subtype, which has less efficacy than IgG1. The recent discovery of a unique relapsing fever genospecies, B. tachyglossi, in the Australian tick Ixodes holicus is the echidna tick Bothrioproton concolor, indicates that Australia does have its own tick-borne disease pathogens. Borrelia species has been documented in native wildlife for almost from the beginning of European settlement in Australia. A relapsing of Borrelia was found in bush rats. 259. Lyme patients with food allergies, chemical sensitivities, and metal toxicity. 265. Rickettsia, a blanketed term for bacterial infection related to tick bite. It has infected as many as 10 million Mexicans. 2 million confirmed cases of Borrelia burgdorferi. 270. Lyme is a multi-system disease that primarily involves skin, CNS, heart, and joints. 283. On November 15, 2018, the European Parliament unanimously endorsed a resolution for Lyme, stating Lyme borreliosis is the most common zoonotic disease in Europe. So that's my notes for that book, and I definitely recommend people read it. I'll go on to the next one. The Mosquito, A Human History of Our Deadliest Predator by Timothy C. Weingart. He has a PhD in history from the University of Oxford. He's a history and political science prof at Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction, Colorado, and he served as an officer with the Canadian British Armed Forces. And I mean, it says something strange that he comes from Oxford and he ends up in Grand Junction, Colorado, right? So I figure he must be doing something with the military there or something, because I don't know why somebody with a PhD from Oxford would end up teaching there. Anyway, page 1. 110 trillion mosquitoes in the globe. They aren't found in Antarctica, Iceland, the Seychelles, and some French Polynesian micro-islands. The mosquito remains the deadliest hunter of human beings on the planet. Last year she slaughtered only 830,000 people. That was a quote. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has contributed contributed nearly $4 billion to mosquito research since its creation in 2000, released an annual report that identifies the animals most lethal to humans. Since 2000, the annual average number of human deaths caused by mosquito is approximately 2 million. Humans cause 475,000 human deaths a year. Snakes, 50,000. Dogs and sandflies, 25,000. Don't worry about that. I'm done with that. Tsetse fly and assassin kissing blood, 10,000 each. Page 5. Our war with the mosquito is the war of our world. That's how he finishes the first chapter. And it's funny because, I mean, he's a history guy, and history people are really poor. And,
Some for me.
yeah. Well, James isn't that way. And he's interested in history. Anyway, page 8. Mosquitoes prefer blood type O over A and B, and I'm O. So they should really love me. But remember in the summer, they were going after James more than me when I was drinking lots of lemon. I don't think they like lemon in the blood. Type O's are bitten twice as much as A. Mosquitoes like beer drinkers. They can smell CO2 from over 200 feet away. Page 9. Pregnant women are bit twice as often. They respire 20% more CO2 and have a slightly elevated body temperature. Males swarm together and mate frequently in their lifetime. A female only needs one batch of sperm to produce many batches of offspring. Page 11. The two oldest fossilized mosquitoes are preserved in amber in Canada and Myanmar from 105 to 80 million years ago. Page 17. Currently, zoonosis accounts for 75,000 of all human diseases. The group that has increased most in the past 50 years is the arboviruses. These are viruses that are transmitted by arthropod vectors like ticks, gnats, and mosquitoes. In 1930, the only 6 such viruses were known to cause disease in humans. Now 505 are known to. 20. Aedes mosquito transmits diseases like yellow fever, dengue, chikungunya, West Nile, Zika, and encephalitis. Page 21. Anopheles mosquito are the sole vectors of 5 types of malaria, Plasmodium. 22. Flu-like symptoms 3 to 10 days after contagion from mosquito bite. Old, young, pregnant women, and those with medical issues are those who make up the bulk of the casualties. A successful vaccine for yellow fever was created in 1937, but between 30,000 and 50,000 people still die from it annually. 95% of the casualties are in Africa. Most people don't die from yellow fever, but 25% don't recover. 23. Filariasis, commonly called elephantitis, is spread by Aedes, Anopheles, and Culex mosquitoes. These worms invade and obstruct the lymphatic system, which causes retained fluids, swelling in lower extremities and genitals. Scrotums can surpass the size of large beach balls. It's treatable with inexpensive modern pharmaceuticals. 32. Children who inherit sickle cell from a parent are 90% immune from falciparum malaria, but the average lifespan of those with sickle cell is only 23 years. Those who inherit sickle cell from both parents usually die in infancy. 35. G6-PDD, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, robs red blood cells of an enzyme that protects the cells against oxygen-rating substances known as oxidants. Page 36. G6-PDD offers partial immunity to malaria, but not to the extent that Duffy negativity and sickle cell does. 38. Cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, basil, and onions ease malaria symptoms. 39. Tannic acid in tea can kill the bacteria that cause cholera, typhoid, and dysentery. 40. Caffeine, like pyrethins, is a natural insecticide. Disrupts the nervous system of insects. 163. Cinchona bark, quinine, added it to gin and became known as the gin and tonic. 367. The cheap miracle chemical DDT, unearthed in 1939, proved to be a universal lifesaver. That's a quote. Page 374. This is another quote. Paul Hernan Mueller recognized its insecticidal properties, earning him the 1948 Nobel Prize for his discovery of the high efficiency of DDT as a contact poison against several arthropods. .375. The insecticidal mechanism of DDT operated by quickly scrambling the proteins and plasma of sodium ion channels and neurotransmitters, disrupting the nervous system of its target, which leads to spasms, seizures, and death. .381. Walt Disney made a malaria prevention film in 1943, The Winged Scourge, with cameos by Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. .392. DDT used a lot in World War II. .393. By 1945, DDT commercially available to farmers in U.S. .394. Between 1947 and 1970, sales of DDT peaked at over $2 billion. Production, primarily based in the U.S., rose more than 900%. In 1963, 15 American companies, including Dow, DuPont, Merck, Monsanto, now a division of Bayer, Ciba, now Novartis, Penwalt, Pensalt, Montrose, and Velsicol produced 82,000 tons of DDT, worth $1.04 billion. Quote, our planet has been bathed in roughly 1.8 million tons, 4 billion pounds, of DDT, with more than 600,000 tons, 1.32 billion pounds, blanketed across the United States alone. Another quote, between 1945 and 1980, global agriculture was annually spreading 40,000 tons of DDT on ingestible crops, increasing yields and producing bountiful harvests free from the predation of pestering insects. In India, not only did the widespread use of DDT engulf mosquitoes and rout endemic malaria, but during the 1950s, agricultural and industrial productivity increased by an annual average of over $1 billion. Around the planet, harvests increased and consumer costs on staple foods such as wheat, rice, potatoes, cabbage, and corn dropped by as much as 60% in certain regions of Africa, India, and Asia. DDT was a universal success and was lauded as a life-saving chemical. This compound was the mosquito's kryptonite and provided a future for millions of people throughout the world. .398. The American Institute of Medicine of the National Academies in 2004 reported, when used indoors in limited quantities, DDT's entry into the global food chain is minimal. .399. By the 1960s, the world was crawling with DDT-immune mosquitoes, harboring malaria parasites that were resistant to the best drugs we could launch their way. .412. Thanks to sensationalized media and a steady, nauseating stream of formulaic Hollywood virus-born zombie and culture of fear films, and shows such as Outbreak, 12 Monkeys, I Am Legend, Contagion, 28 Days Later, World War Z, The Walking Dead, The Andromeda Strain, and The Passage, to name only a few, our screen time generations do fear Ebola, SARS, the flus, and some futuristic yet unknown man-eating virus. I don't think they're fearing it because of the films that they're watching. .413. Seemingly out of nowhere in 1999, the mosquito attacked New York City and struck fear into the heart of a panicking superpower. The United States summarily responded with a sustained and surging counterattack commanded by Bill and Melinda Gates. .419. The Discovery Channel film Mosquito of 2017 called it the single greatest agent of death in modern human history. Zika can be sexually transmitted between partners of both genders and from mother to fetus.